My name is Allison, and at 34, I never expected to be standing frozen in a school gymnasium while another mother publicly humiliated me. Natalie Anderson, with her perfect blonde bob and designer dress, smiled sweetly before delivering the knife twist. Well, at least my baby has a father. The room fell silent. My 16-year-old son Tyler had just walked up behind me, his face flushing with anger as he heard every word. What Natalie didn't know was that Tyler had recently discovered something about her perfect husband Brett that would shatter her world completely. The look in my son's eyes told me he was done keeping secrets. Natalie's picture-perfect life was about to implode. Before I tell you how this all unfolded, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever dealt with judgmental people, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up to bullies and finding justice in unexpected ways. I never planned on being a single mother. But life rarely follows our carefully laid plans, does it? Tyler came into my world after a brief relationship with a man who made it clear he wasn't interested in fatherhood. By the time I discovered I was pregnant, he had already moved across the country. I made the decision to raise my son alone, and I've never regretted it for a second. The early years were brutal. I worked 2 jobs while finishing my nursing degree, often surviving on 4 hours of sleep. Daycare costs ate half my paycheck, and I learned to stretch the other half with coupons and thrift store shopping. There were nights I cried silently in the bathroom after Tyler fell asleep, overwhelmed by the weight of being everything for this little person who depended entirely on me. But we made it. Through all the parent-teacher conferences I attended alone, through the baseball games where other kids had both parents cheering, through the chicken pox and broken arms and nightmares, Tyler and I developed a bond that went beyond the typical mother-son relationship. We were a team, us against the world. Our town of Oak Ridge isn't particularly large, about 40,000 people, but it's the kind of place where reputation follows you like a shadow. Old money families live in the historic district, attend the same church as their grandparents did, and generally run the town's social hierarchy. As a single mother who rented a small duplex on the east side, I was automatically assigned to a lower social tier. I managed to work my way up to head nurse at Oak Ridge Memorial, which gave us financial stability and earned me a certain professional respect. But in social settings, particularly those revolving around the school, I remained an outsider. The Andersons represented everything I wasn't. Brett Anderson owned the largest real estate development company in the county. His wife Natalie had never worked a day in her life, instead dedicating herself to charity boards and PTA leadership. Their daughter Emma was in 2nd grade, a pretty little girl with her mother's blonde hair and her father's confident smile. They lived in a sprawling colonial in the historic district, hosted the town's most exclusive Christmas party, and Brett even taught Sunday school at First Presbyterian. From the moment Tyler started high school and I began attending school functions again, Natalie seemed to take special pleasure in reminding me of my status. It was never anything overtly cruel, she was too sophisticated for that. Instead, it was the subtle exclusions from committee email chains, the surprised "oh, I didn't think this would interest you" when I offered to help with fundraisers, the way she'd emphasize both parents when discussing attendance requirements for certain events. Tyler noticed it all. My son had grown into a thoughtful, observant young man. At 16, he stood nearly 6 feet tall, but retained a quiet demeanor that sometimes made people underestimate him. He excelled academically and had a small circle of close friends, but he wasn't part of the popular crowd. I'd raised him to value character over status, and he'd embraced that lesson completely. Over the past 6 months, I'd noticed changes in Tyler. He'd become more secretive, spending hours in his room on his computer. When I asked what he was working on, he'd vaguely mention school projects or research. I trusted him, he'd never given me reason not to, but I sensed something was weighing on him. More puzzling was his reaction whenever the Andersons were mentioned or present at community events. He'd grown increasingly uncomfortable around them, particularly Brett. Once, when Brett approached us at a school band concert to compliment Tyler's trumpet solo, my son had been almost curt in his response, leaving me to smooth over the awkward interaction. "What was that about?" I'd asked him later. Nothing, he'd replied, staring out the car window. I just don't like fake people. I'd let it drop, assuming it was typical teenage antipathy toward authority figures. Now I wish I'd pressed harder. The annual spring fundraiser at Oak Ridge High was the social event of the season for parents. It combined a silent auction with student performances and raised money for the school's arts program. As a single working mother, I'd spent weeks preparing, finding a dress on sale that could pass for designer, putting aside a small amount from each paycheck to bid on at least one auction item, rehearsing small talk topics that wouldn't reveal how different my life was from the other parents. I never expected it would be the night everything fell apart. The gymnasium had been transformed with twinkling lights and gauzy fabric draped from the ceiling, creating the illusion of an elegant venue rather than a space that usually smelled like teenage sweat and floor polish. Student artwork lined the walls, each piece accompanied by a bidding sheet. In the center of the room, refreshment tables offered catered hors d'oeuvres and punch that had definitely been spiked by someone's discreet flask. I entered alone, having dropped Tyler off at the band entrance earlier. He would be performing halfway through the evening with the jazz ensemble. My navy blue dress was a lucky find from a consignment shop, and I'd splurged on having my hair professionally styled. For once, I didn't feel completely out of place. That feeling lasted approximately 15 minutes. I was examining a particularly impressive watercolor landscape when I heard Natalie's distinctive laugh behind me. She stood with her usual circle. Diane Prescott, whose husband owned the local bank, Melissa Harrington, a former beauty queen whose family had a street named after them, and Stephanie Wilkes, who served on the city council. They formed a barrier of expensive perfume and subtle judgment. Allison. Natalie called out, waving me over with perfect red nails. Don't you look nice tonight? Is that dress new? There was no escape without seeming rude. I plastered on a smile and approached the group. Thank you. It's not new, just something I don't get to wear often. Well, it's lovely, she said, her eyes indicating otherwise. We were just discussing the summer gala committee. Stephanie has offered her country club for the venue this year. That sounds wonderful, I replied, knowing full well I wouldn't be invited to join the committee. It's going to be couples-focused this year, Melissa added. We're thinking of a ballroom dancing theme, with professional instructors giving mini lessons throughout the night. How fun, I said, taking a sip of punch to hide my discomfort. Of course, we need strong male participation, Diane chimed in. Brett has already volunteered to handle the sponsorships, haven't you, darling? I hadn't noticed Brett joining the circle. He stood behind Natalie, one hand possessively on her waist, the other holding a glass of what appeared to be scotch. He was handsome in the conventional way of successful men, tall, fit from regular golf games, with prematurely silver hair that added to his aura of authority. Happy to help, he said smoothly. The business community needs to support our schools. Brett's company just donated all the printing for tonight's program, Natalie added, leaning into her husband. And he's bidding on that ridiculous football package that costs a fortune. All for a good cause, Brett said with practiced modesty. It must be nice, Natalie continued, to have a partner who's so involved in the community. Brett never misses Emma's recitals either, no matter how busy he is. She turned her gaze directly to me. I've always thought children need that stability, don't you? A present father figure? The comment hung in the air. Diane and Melissa exchanged glances, while Stephanie suddenly became very interested in her cocktail napkin. I think children need loving, honest people in their lives, I replied evenly. Regardless of family structure. Oh, I'm sure you do your best, Natalie said with faux sympathy. It's just not the same though, is it? Emma is so secure knowing her daddy is always there. That foundation is irreplaceable. Her voice lowered to a stage whisper. And between us, you can see the difference in the children from alternative family situations. They always seem to be missing something. My cheeks burned, but years of dealing with difficult patients had taught me to maintain my composure. Tyler seems to be doing just fine. He's graduating with honors next year and has already been approached by several universities. Well, that's wonderful, Natalie said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Exceptions do happen. But statistically speaking, children from broken homes. My home isn't broken, I interrupted, my patience finally snapping. It's just different from yours. Natalie's eyes widened slightly at my interruption. I'm only saying that Emma has advantages that come with stability and a complete family unit. At least my baby has a father who's devoted to her. The words hit like a physical blow. In 16 years of parenting alone, I'd developed thick skin, but something about Natalie's smug certainty made this barb sink deeper than most. Before I could respond, I felt a presence beside me. Tyler had appeared, still in his band uniform, his trumpet case clutched tightly in one hand. The look on his face told me he'd heard every word. Mom, he said quietly, his eyes never leaving Natalie's face. Mrs. Harrington said the jazz ensemble can leave now if we want. I'm ready to go when you are. Tyler. Natalie's tone immediately shifted to sugary sweetness. Your performance was wonderful. Brett and I were just saying how talented the band has become under Mr. Rivera's direction. Tyler didn't smile. Thank you, he said flatly. Then, with a calm that surprised me, he added, my mom has done an amazing job raising me by herself. I'm glad I don't need anyone else. The air between us crackled with tension. Brett stepped forward, placing a hand on Natalie's shoulder. Your mother should be very proud, he said smoothly. Will you be performing at the summer gala as well? Tyler's gaze shifted to Brett, and something passed between them, something I couldn't interpret but that made Brett's hand tighten visibly on his wife's shoulder. I haven't decided yet, Tyler replied, his voice suddenly cold. I've been busy with other projects. We should go, I said, sensing the strange undercurrent. It's been a long day. I said polite goodbyes, tugging Tyler along before anything else could be said. As we walked away, I heard Natalie's voice behind us, not quite soft enough. Poor thing, she tries so hard, but you can see the boy is affected by not having a father figure. In the car, Tyler sat rigidly in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. I waited until we were several blocks from the school before speaking. I'm sorry you had to hear that, I said. I'm not, he replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. She won't be laughing for long. Something in his tone sent a chill through me. Tyler, what does that mean? He turned to look at me, his expression more mature than I'd ever seen it. Mom, there's something I need to tell you when we get home. About Brett Anderson. The rest of the drive passed in tense silence, with me gripping the steering wheel too tightly and 100 questions racing through my mind. It was nearly midnight when I knocked on Tyler's bedroom door. After we'd arrived home, he disappeared into his room, saying he needed to gather some information before we talked. I'd changed out of my dress, made a pot of tea, and waited, my stomach knotted with anxiety. Come in, he called. I found him sitting at his desk, his laptop open and several folders neatly arranged beside it. His face looked drawn, older somehow, as if the weight of whatever he was about to share had aged him. Tyler, you're scaring me, I said, sitting on the edge of his bed. What's going on? He took a deep breath. 6 months ago, I was working on a history project at the public library. I was in one of those small study rooms in the back. He paused, collecting his thoughts. Mr. Anderson came in and took the study room next to mine. The walls are thin there. I nodded, remembering the cramped study spaces with their flimsy dividers. He was on his phone, Tyler continued. At first, I didn't pay much attention. But then I heard him say, I miss you too, baby. Daddy will be home tomorrow. Tyler's jaw tightened. Mom, you know Emma calls him Daddy, not Dad. And the way he was talking, it wasn't to a child. Tyler, maybe you misunderstood. He could have been talking to a relative's child, or... That's what I thought too, he interrupted. But then he said, tell Kevin that Daddy brought him that baseball glove he wanted. Tyler met my eyes directly. Emma doesn't have a brother named Kevin. I felt a chill run through me. You couldn't have heard all this clearly through those walls. The rooms share a vent, Tyler said. And he wasn't being quiet. He thought he was alone. He turned to his laptop. I know it sounds crazy. That's why I didn't say anything at first. I thought maybe I misheard, or there was some explanation. But then I started noticing things. What kinds of things? Mr. Anderson teaches Sunday school, right? But he misses it at least twice a month. Dad's weekend, he calls it. He's supposedly visiting his mother in Springfield. I frowned. How do you know his schedule? Emma mentioned it at school once, complaining that her dad was missing her soccer game to visit Grandma. Then 2 weeks later, she said the same thing. Tyler turned his laptop toward me. So I got curious and did some research. On the screen was a Facebook page for a woman named Kimberly Davis. The profile picture showed a pretty brunette with 2 children, a boy around 10 and a girl who looked about 5. Look at her relationship status, Tyler said quietly. I squinted at the screen. The relationship field showed in a relationship with Brett Anderson and was dated 5 years ago. This doesn't prove anything, I said, though doubt had begun to creep in. Maybe it's someone with the same name. Or an old profile she never updated. Tyler clicked through to her photo albums. With growing horror, I saw recent pictures of Brett, unmistakably him, with this woman and her children. In one, they were building a sandcastle on a beach. In another, they were decorating a Christmas tree in what was clearly not the Andersons' home. She lives in Riverdale, Tyler said. About 50 miles from here. He goes there every other weekend and sometimes during the week when he claims to be on business trips. I sat back, stunned. Tyler, how did you find all this? He looked down, suddenly seeming younger again. After I heard him at the library, I got suspicious. I followed him one day after school when he said he was going to a regional business meeting. He drove straight to Riverdale. Tyler's voice grew quieter. I know it was wrong to spy on him. But after the way Mrs. Anderson has always treated you, always acting so superior because she has the perfect husband and family, I couldn't let it go. You've been investigating this for 6 months? I asked, still trying to process everything. Tyler nodded. At first, I just wanted to be sure. I set up fake social media accounts to look into his connections. I used public records to find property information. He gestured to the folders. Brett Anderson co-owns a house in Riverdale with Kimberly Davis. He's listed as the father on her son's school emergency contact form. I found that on the school's poorly secured website. I leafed through the folder, increasingly disturbed by the thoroughness of Tyler's investigation. There were photos taken from a distance of Brett entering a modest suburban home, financial records showing regular transfers from Brett's personal account to one belonging to Kimberly Davis, even a copy of what appeared to be a life insurance policy naming her and the children as beneficiaries. Tyler, this is extensive, I said carefully. I'm concerned about how far you've taken this. I had to be sure, he insisted. I needed proof before I said anything. His eyes were pleading for understanding. Mom, he's living a complete double life. Natalie has no idea. Neither does Kimberly, as far as I can tell. He's lying to everyone. I set the folder down, my mind racing. Why are you showing me this now? Because of what she said to you tonight. Tyler's hands balled into fists. The way she looked down on you, talked about how lucky Emma is to have such a devoted father, how children need both parents, it's all built on a lie. And I'm tired of watching her hurt you with her fake perfect life. I reached for my son's hand, squeezing it gently. Tyler, what Mr. Anderson is doing is terrible. But it's not our place to expose him. Why not? Tyler demanded. After how they've treated you for years? Mrs. Anderson acts like you're a failure because you're a single mom, but at least you're honest. At least you're not living a lie. Exposing him would hurt a lot of innocent people, I said. Emma. Kimberly. Her children. They deserve to know the truth, Tyler argued. And what about the money? Where is he getting it to maintain two households? Mom, I think he might be embezzling from his company. That gave me pause. What makes you think that? Tyler pulled out another folder. His company's financial reports are public because they have municipal contracts. The numbers don't add up in some places. And there are these LLC entities that receive regular payments for consulting services but don't seem to do anything. I stared at my son, torn between pride at his intelligence and concern about his obsession with this. Tyler, this is serious. If what you're saying is true, it goes beyond just a personal betrayal. That's why we have to do something, he insisted. It's wrong, Mom. All of it. And I can't keep pretending I don't know when I see them around town. I sat in silence for a long moment, processing everything. The evidence seemed compelling, but taking action would irrevocably change many lives, including our own. Let me think about this, I finally said. We need to be careful about how we proceed, if we proceed at all. Tyler nodded, looking relieved that I was at least considering it. Just promise me you won't let her keep talking to you that way. Not when you know the truth. I hugged my son, marveling at the young man he'd become, fiercely protective, deeply principled, and far more perceptive than I'd realized. I promise, I said. But for now, let's keep this between us while I figure out what to do. As I left his room, I felt as though the ground beneath my feet had shifted. The carefully maintained social hierarchy of our town suddenly seemed as flimsy as a house of cards, and we were holding the card that could bring it all tumbling down. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I needed time to think, to verify what Tyler had shown me before making any decisions. While he was at school, I spread his research across our kitchen table and began my own investigation. The evidence was compelling. Brett Anderson, pillar of the community and supposedly devoted family man, had been living a double life for at least 7 years. The oldest pictures of him with Kimberly Davis dated back to before his daughter Emma was born. This wasn't a case of a marriage gone bad and a man finding comfort elsewhere. This was systematic deception from the beginning. Kimberly's Facebook page painted a picture of a happy family. She referred to Brett as her better half and the kid's superhero dad. Her son Kevin's baseball team photos showed Brett as an assistant coach. The little girl, Lily, had Brett's eyes and smile. Unlike Natalie, who curated a perfect social media presence of charity galas and designer outfits, Kimberly posted simple family moments. Backyard barbecues, homework sessions, movie nights on the couch. It was, in many ways, a mirror image of Brett's life with Natalie, just in a different economic bracket. Where Natalie had country club memberships and designer clothes, Kimberly had a modest home and a job as an elementary school teacher. Brett seemed to move between these worlds effortlessly, adapting to each environment like a chameleon changing colors. Tyler's financial research was amateur but surprisingly thorough. He'd identified several shell companies that received regular payments from Brett's development firm for unspecified consulting services. The amounts weren't enormous individually, but collectively they added up to over $200,000 annually, more than enough to support a second household. I needed to confirm this myself before taking any action. Despite my distaste for Brett's behavior, I couldn't rely solely on my teenage son's investigation, no matter how meticulous it seemed. The opportunity came 3 days later. Brett had announced at a PTA meeting that he would be attending a regional development conference in Springfield that Wednesday. According to Tyler's notes, this was one of his regular patterns. He would tell Natalie he was going to Springfield but would actually spend the day in Riverdale. I arranged to take a personal day, told Tyler I was handling things my way and made him promise to go to school as usual, then drove to Riverdale early Wednesday morning. I parked near the address Tyler had identified as Kimberly's home, feeling like a character in a bad spy movie. The neighborhood was pleasant but modest, small ranch homes with well-kept yards, bicycles and driveways, and family-sized sedans parked along the curb. At 8:30 a.m., Brett's black BMW pulled into Kimberly's driveway. He emerged wearing casual clothes rather than his usual business suit, carrying a pink backpack that I recognized as the style Emma used for dance class. He unlocked the front door with his own key and disappeared inside. My hand shook as I processed what I was seeing. Part of me had been hoping Tyler was wrong, that there was some explanation that didn't involve such elaborate deception. But here was the proof, right in front of me. 20 minutes later, a young girl, Lily, I presumed, came bouncing out of the house with Brett behind her. He helped her into a booster seat in his car, then returned to the house briefly before emerging with Kimberly. They shared a loving kiss in the driveway before she got into her own car and drove away, presumably to her teaching job. Brett and Lily then drove to what appeared to be a preschool. I watched from a distance as he walked her inside, chatting animatedly with teachers who clearly knew him well. When he returned to his car, his phone rang. From his body language, the way he straightened his posture and adjusted his tone, I could tell he was speaking to someone from his Oak Ridge life. I followed him to a local coffee shop where he set up a laptop and appeared to be working. 2 hours later, he picked up Lily from preschool and took her to lunch at a casual diner. They were joined by the older boy, Kevin, who must have been on a school lunch break. Brett ruffled the boy's hair affectionately and appeared completely at ease in his role as father. By 3 p.m., I'd seen enough. Brett had seamlessly stepped into his second life, with no indication that he felt any guilt or discomfort. He was as natural in this role as he was as Natalie's husband and Emma's father in Oak Ridge. I drove home in a daze, trying to process everything I'd witnessed. This wasn't just an affair. Brett Anderson had created an entire parallel life, complete with a home, a long-term relationship, and children who clearly viewed him as their father. The level of compartmentalization required was staggering. Back in Oak Ridge, I reached out to Jessica Murphy, a nurse who had worked with me for years before taking an administrative position at Brett's company. We met for coffee after her workday ended. "I need to ask you something confidential," I said once we were settled in a quiet corner of the cafe. "It's about Brett Anderson." Jessica's eyebrows rose. "What about him? Have you noticed anything unusual about the company finances?" She set down her cup slowly. "Why are you asking?" "Please, Jess. It's important." She glanced around before leaning forward. "There have been some questions lately. The accounting department flagged several consulting contracts that seem to have minimal deliverables. The amounts aren't huge, but they're consistent, and they all lead back to LLCs with vague business purposes." My heart sank. "And who approves these contracts?" "Brett personally handles them. He says they're for specialized market research, but..." She hesitated. "Allison, what's this about?" I couldn't tell her everything, not yet. "I'm concerned that there might be financial improprieties happening. Can you tell me how long these contracts have been in place?" Jessica frowned. "At least 7 years, as far as I can tell. They were established before I joined the company." She studied my face. "Allison, do you know something?" "I'm not sure yet," I answered truthfully. "But I think Brett Anderson isn't who everyone believes him to be." Back home, I found Tyler waiting anxiously. "Did you see him?" he asked as soon as I walked in. I nodded, sinking into a kitchen chair. "Yes. Everything you found appears to be true." Tyler didn't look triumphant, just resigned. "So what do we do now?" That was the question I'd been wrestling with all day. The evidence was clear. Brett Anderson was living a double life and potentially committing financial fraud to maintain it. But knowing this truth placed a heavy burden on us. Whatever action we took, or didn't take, would have far-reaching consequences. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But we need to think very carefully about our next steps." As I made dinner that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the two families whose lives hung in the balance, Natalie and Emma in their perfect colonial, Kimberly and her children in their modest ranch home. None of them deserved the pain that Brett's deception would inevitably cause when exposed. Yet, as Tyler had pointed out, they also deserved to know the truth. And if Brett was indeed embezzling from his company, There were legal implications that went beyond personal betrayal. The question wasn't just whether to expose Brett Anderson, but how to do it in a way that minimized collateral damage to innocent people. It was a moral calculus I never expected to face, and certainly not because of a cruel comment at a school fundraiser. The following evening, Tyler and I sat at our kitchen table with all the evidence spread before us. 2 untouched mugs of tea grew cold as we debated our options. "We should just tell Mrs. Anderson everything," Tyler argued. "She has a right to know her husband has another family." "It's not that simple," I countered. "Exposing Brett would hurt a lot of people who've done nothing wrong. But keeping his secret means letting him continue to lie and steal," Tyler pointed out. "How is that fair?" He had a point. The moral dilemma weighed heavily on both of us. By staying silent, we would be complicit in Brett's deception. But by speaking out, we would trigger a cascade of pain for 2 families. "What about the financial side?" I asked, redirecting slightly. "If Brett is embezzling from his company, that's illegal." Tyler pulled out the folder containing his financial research. "I've been looking more closely at these shell companies. 3 of them are registered to P.O. boxes in Riverdale. The 4th is registered to what looks like a vacant lot outside of town. Which means they're not real businesses," Tyler explained. "They're just a way to funnel money out of the company and into Brett's personal accounts." I nodded slowly. "And if the company fails because of his fraud? A lot of people could lose their jobs," Tyler finished. "The company employs over 50 people in Oak Ridge alone." The stakes were getting higher by the minute. This wasn't just about Natalie's smug superiority or Brett's personal betrayal. Real people's livelihoods were potentially at risk. "We should talk to a lawyer," I suggested. "Get professional advice before we do anything." Tyler shook his head. "Mom, we can't afford a lawyer who specializes in this kind of thing. And if we start asking around, word will get back to Brett. Oak Ridge isn't that big." He was right again. In our small town, connections ran deep. Brett Anderson had friends in every professional circle. "What if we confront Brett directly?" I suggested. "Give him the chance to come clean himself?" Tyler considered this. "Do you think he would?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But it might be the most ethical approach. We tell him what we know and give him an ultimatum: either he confesses to both families and the company board, or we'll expose him." "He could just deny everything," Tyler pointed out. "Or worse, he could threaten us somehow. He has a lot more power and money than we do." I thought about that. Brett Anderson was a respected businessman with deep community ties. We were a single mother nurse and her teenage son. In a public confrontation, who would people believe? "We need solid, irrefutable evidence," I said. "Not just social media posts and public records, but something that proves the financial fraud beyond doubt." Tyler turned to his laptop. "I've been tracking the payments from the company to those fake consulting firms. The most recent one was last week, $50,000 to Riverdale Market Research LLC." I leaned over to look at the screen. "Can you trace where that money went after it hit the LLC's account?" "Not without breaking some laws," Tyler admitted. "But we know Brett controls those accounts. The timing of the transfers matches his visit schedule to Riverdale almost perfectly." We sat in silence for a moment, weighing our options. "What about Kimberly?" I asked softly. "Should she be warned too?" Tyler looked troubled. "I think she's as much a victim as Mrs. Anderson. She probably has no idea he's married to someone else." "This is going to destroy multiple lives," I said, the weight of the situation settling heavily on my shoulders. "Brett already did that," Tyler replied firmly. "We're just bringing the truth to light." My son's moral clarity both impressed and concerned me. At 16, he saw the world in more black and white terms than I did at 34. Yet his basic premise was sound: the destruction had already occurred, hidden beneath Brett's elaborate facade of lies. "What if we approach him privately first?" I suggested. One chance to do the right thing before we take action. Tyler nodded slowly. That seems fair. But we should be prepared for him to react badly. We'll meet in a public place, I said. Somewhere he can't make a scene. And we should have copies of all the evidence ready to show him, so he knows we're serious. We spent the next hour organizing our documentation, creating 3 identical packets containing printouts of financial records, social media posts, property documents, and photographs. One packet would be for Brett, one for us to keep, and one stored securely with a trusted friend in case anything happened to the others. We should set a deadline, Tyler suggested. Give him 24 hours to begin coming clean, or we go public. That's not much time to dismantle a life he spent years building, I pointed out. He's had 7 years to do the right thing, Tyler countered. Every day he continues the lie is another day he's hurting both families. Again, my son's moral clarity cut through my hesitation. You're right. 24 hours is fair. We decided to approach Brett the following afternoon. He routinely had lunch alone at Oak Ridge Grill on Fridays, a creature of habit even in his deception. We would confront him there, away from both of his families but in a public enough setting that he couldn't react violently or too explosively. As we finalized our plan, I looked at Tyler with a mixture of pride and concern. Are you sure you want to be involved in this? You could let me handle it alone. Tyler shook his head firmly. I found the truth. I should be there when it comes out. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Natalie's smug face as she delivered her cruel comment about Tyler not having a father. I thought about Emma, who adored her daddy and had no idea he had another daughter who also thought he hung the moon. I thought about Kimberly, raising her children with a man who disappeared from their lives for days at a time with well-crafted excuses. Most of all, I thought about Brett Anderson, who had constructed an elaborate house of cards that was about to come crashing down around him. What kind of person could live such a divided life for so many years? Did he love both families? Neither? Did he lie awake at night fearing discovery, or had he become so comfortable in his deception that he no longer felt the weight of it? By morning, I was resolved. This wasn't about revenge for Natalie's cruelty. It was about truth, about consequences, about the moral obligation to not remain silent in the face of wrongdoing. Brett Anderson had made his choices. Now he would face the results. Oak Ridge Grill occupied the ground floor of a converted Victorian house in the town's small business district. Its wood-paneled interior and leather booths provided both ambience and privacy, making it a favorite lunch spot for local businesspeople conducting sensitive conversations. Tyler and I arrived at 12:15, knowing from his research that Brett usually arrived at 12:30 and sat in the same corner booth. We took a table with a clear view of his preferred spot and ordered water to justify our presence. At 12:28, Brett walked in. He wore a charcoal gray suit with a blue tie, looking every inch the successful businessman. The hostess greeted him by name and led him to his usual booth. He didn't notice us watching him. Ready? I asked Tyler quietly. He nodded, his face set with determination. We gathered our things and approached Brett's table just as the waitress delivered his usual scotch on the rocks. Brett, I said, keeping my voice neutral. May we join you for a moment? He looked up, surprise flickering across his face before his usual smooth charm took over. Allison. Tyler. This is unexpected. Please, sit down. He gestured to the empty seats across from him, his expression curious but not yet alarmed. We slid into the booth, and I placed the manila envelope on the table between us. We need to discuss something important, I said, maintaining steady eye contact. Something about your life in Riverdale. The change was immediate. Brett's practiced smile vanished, replaced by a rigid mask. His hand tightened around his scotch glass. I'm not sure what you're talking about. We know about Kimberly Davis, Tyler said quietly. And Kevin and Lily. Brett's eyes darted around the restaurant, checking whether anyone was within earshot. When he looked back at us, his expression had hardened. This is a private matter that doesn't concern either of you. It became our concern when your wife publicly humiliated my mother, Tyler replied, his voice steady despite his youth. When she bragged about what a devoted husband and father you are. I placed a restraining hand on Tyler's arm. Brett, we're not here to threaten you. We're giving you a chance to handle this yourself before it becomes public knowledge. Is this blackmail? Brett asked, his voice low and dangerous. No, I said firmly. This is an opportunity for you to do the right thing on your own terms. I opened the envelope and carefully slid out a few key pieces of evidence, a property record showing his co-ownership of the Riverdale house, a photograph of him with Kimberly and the children, a bank statement showing transfers from his personal account to hers. Brett stared at the documents, his face paling. How did you get these? Everything here is publicly available information, I said, which was mostly true. But that's not all we have. Tyler spoke up. We also know about the shell companies. Riverdale Market Research LLC. Oakview Consulting Group. Sanders Development Advisors. Eastern Regional Analysis. Brett's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his scotch and drained it. You've been investigating me. Yes, I admitted. And we found enough evidence to suggest you're not just deceiving two families, but potentially embezzling from your company to maintain both households. The mention of embezzlement seemed to hit Brett harder than the exposure of his double life. His eyes narrowed. That's a serious accusation without merit. The company's financial records are public because of the municipal contracts, Tyler pointed out. The patterns are clear if you know what to look for. Brett studied my son with new respect and wariness. What exactly do you want? We want you to tell the truth, I said simply. To both families and to your company's board of directors. Brett laughed, a hollow sound without humor. Just like that? Destroy everything I've built over the past 7 years? You destroyed it the moment you started living a lie, Tyler said. Brett leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Listen to me. This is more complicated than you could possibly understand. I have responsibilities to both families. I provide for them. I care for them. No one is being harmed. Except by the constant deception, I countered. And potentially the company and its employees if you're misappropriating funds. I've grown the company to 3 times its original size, Brett hissed. Every employee has benefited from my leadership. The consulting fees are a fraction of our profits. So you admit to the financial fraud, Tyler said, his tone making it a statement rather than a question. Brett realized his mistake too late. He sat back, visibly regrouping. What I'm saying is that this situation is nuanced. Exposing it would hurt innocent people, including children. We've thought about that, I acknowledged. That's why we're giving you the chance to handle it yourself. You have 24 hours to begin coming clean to both families and your board. 24 hours? Brett's voice rose slightly before he caught himself. That's impossible. I can't dismantle my entire life in a day. You don't have to complete the process in 24 hours, I clarified. But you need to start it. Make the first difficult conversation. Begin taking responsibility. And if I refuse? His tone had turned calculating. Then we'll deliver copies of this information to Natalie, Kimberly, and your board chair, Tyler said matter-of-factly. Brett studied us both, seeming to reassess the situation. I could pay you. Whatever you think is fair. This doesn't need to become messy. The offer hung in the air between us. I felt Tyler tense beside me. We're not interested in your money, I said firmly. This isn't about financial gain for us. Then what is it about? Brett demanded. Revenge because Natalie said something insensitive? Is ruining multiple lives worth it for that petty satisfaction? This isn't about revenge, I insisted, though I couldn't deny that Natalie's comment had been the catalyst. It's about truth. About consequences for actions. About not allowing you to continue deceiving people who trust you. Brett's expression shifted, becoming almost pleading. Allison, you're a reasonable person. A nurse. You help people. Think about the pain this will cause, to Natalie, to Emma, to Kimberly, and her kids. Is that really what you want? What I want is for you to take responsibility for your choices, I replied steadily. The pain is inevitable now. The question is whether you'll face it with some shred of integrity or continue hiding behind lies until someone else exposes you. Brett turned to Tyler. And you? You're just a kid. Do you really understand what you're doing? The lives you're affecting? Tyler met his gaze without flinching. I understand that my mom raised me to be honest. To face consequences. To respect other people enough not to lie to them every day. Brett's face hardened again. You have no idea what it takes to support two families, to balance responsibilities, to keep everyone happy and cared for. You're right, Tyler agreed. I don't know what it's like to live a lie for years. And I don't want to know. Brett fell silent, staring at the evidence spread before him. For a moment, I glimpsed the weight he'd been carrying, the constant vigilance required to maintain his dual lives, the fear of discovery that must have shadowed his every move. How did it start? I asked, my voice softer. With Kimberly, I mean. Brett looked up, surprised by the question. For a moment, his carefully maintained facade cracked. I met her before Natalie, he admitted. We were together first. But then my father died, and I took over the company. The board members, the business community, they all had expectations about the kind of person who should run Anderson Development. Kimberly was a kindergarten teacher from a working-class family. She didn't fit the image. So you married Natalie instead, I guessed. Brett nodded slowly. Her father was on the city council. Her family had the right connections. It was a business decision at first. He looked down at his empty glass. But I couldn't bring myself to leave Kimberly. I loved her. And then she got pregnant with Kevin, and... You decided to have both, Tyler finished, his tone flat. I provide for both families, Brett said defensively. Neither wants for anything. I'm there for all my children. Except when you're not, I pointed out. Because you can't be in two places at once. Brett had no response to that. 24 hours, I repeated, gathering the documents and returning them to the envelope. Starting now. We expect to hear that you've initiated conversations with both Natalie and Kimberly by this time tomorrow. And the board? Brett asked, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. That should come after you've spoken to your families, I conceded. But no later than Monday. We stood to leave. Brett remained seated, looking suddenly smaller in his expensive suit, the confident businessman replaced by a man facing the collapse of his carefully constructed world. Allison, he called as we turned away. This won't just hurt them. It will destroy me. Everything I've built. I looked back at him, feeling an unexpected twinge of pity despite everything. You should have thought of that 7 years ago, Brett. As Tyler and I walked out of the restaurant, I felt the weight of what we'd just done. We had set in motion a series of events that would irrevocably change many lives. There was no turning back now. Do you think he'll do it? Tyler asked as we got into the car. I don't know, I admitted. But we've given him the chance to do the right thing. That's all we can do. We drove home in silence, both lost in thoughts about the consequences of truth and the power of secrets finally brought to light. 26 hours later, my phone rang. It was Jessica from Brett's company. Allison, have you heard? She asked without preamble. Heard what? Brett Anderson has been suspended pending an internal investigation. The board called an emergency meeting last night. Something about financial irregularities. Her voice lowered. People are saying he's disappeared. Didn't come home last night. Natalie's frantic. My stomach tightened. Jessica, I can't talk about this right now. You knew, didn't you? She pressed. That's why you were asking those questions. I'm sorry, I really can't discuss it, I repeated, then quickly ended the call. Tyler looked up from his homework at the kitchen table. What happened? Brett's been suspended from the company, I told him. And apparently he's missing. Tyler's eyes widened. Do you think he ran? I don't know, I admitted. But he didn't keep his end of our agreement. We had waited the full 24 hours, checking social media and our local connections for any sign that Brett had begun confessing to either family. There had been nothing but business-as-usual posts from Natalie about charity committee meetings and Emma's dance recital. We had reluctantly made the decision to follow through on our ultimatum. Using anonymous email accounts created specifically for this purpose, we had sent copies of our evidence to Natalie, Kimberly, and the chair of Brett's company board. Now it appeared the board had acted immediately, but Brett had chosen to flee rather than face the consequences. By evening, the news had spread throughout Oak Ridge. Brett Anderson, respected businessman and community leader, was under investigation for financial misconduct and had disappeared without a trace. Speculation ran wild, with theories ranging from embezzlement to gambling debts. The bombshell about his second family didn't break until the following day, when Natalie, white-faced and flanked by her parents, was photographed entering a divorce attorney's office. Someone, not us, had leaked the story to the local news website. Prominent developer Brett Anderson accused of maintaining secret second family, the headline blared. The article referenced anonymous sources claiming Brett had been living a double life for years, with a longtime girlfriend and 2 children in neighboring Riverdale. Within hours, Brett's carefully constructed world had completely unraveled. His professional reputation, his social standing, his family relationships, all were in tatters. I felt a complex mix of emotions as I watched the story unfold. There was a certain satisfaction in seeing the truth come to light, particularly when I remembered Natalie's cruel words at the fundraiser. But there was also genuine sadness for the innocent people caught in the fallout, especially the children. Tyler and I kept a low profile, neither confirming nor denying our role in Brett's exposure. But in a town like Oak Ridge, secrets rarely stay buried for long. 3 days after Brett's disappearance, I opened my front door to find Natalie Anderson standing on my porch. She looked nothing like the polished, confident woman I'd known for years. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face bare of makeup, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a plain sweater. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice subdued. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let her enter. Tyler was at school, which was probably for the best. "I know it was you," Natalie said once we were seated in my living room. "You and your son. You exposed Brett." I didn't deny it. "How did you figure it out?" "The timing. The way Tyler looked at Brett at the fundraiser." She twisted her wedding ring absently. "And the fact that you were both missing from the spring concert last month when Brett claimed he saw you there. He was actually in Riverdale, wasn't he?" I nodded slowly. "Natalie, I'm sorry for the pain this has caused you and Emma. That was never our intention." She laughed bitterly. "What was your intention then? Revenge because I said something insensitive at the fundraiser?" "That was the catalyst," I admitted. "But once we discovered the extent of Brett's deception, particularly the financial fraud, we felt obligated to bring it to light." "So noble," she said sarcastically. Then her face crumpled. "Do you know what it's like to have your entire life exposed as a lie? To have to explain to your 8-year-old daughter that Daddy has another family he loves just as much?" "No," I said quietly. "I can't imagine how difficult that must be." Natalie wiped away a tear. "The worst part is, I suspected something. Not this, never this, but something. The business trips that seemed unnecessary. The calls he'd take in another room. The way he'd sometimes mention people or places and then quickly change the subject." She shook her head. I ignored the signs because I wanted to believe in our perfect life. I didn't know what to say. The conversation was surreal, Natalie Anderson sitting in my modest living room, confiding in me after years of subtle condescension. "Have you heard from him?" I asked. She shook her head. "No. The police think he's fled the country. Apparently, he withdrew large sums of cash in the days before you confronted him. Almost like he was preparing for this possibility." That surprised me. "He knew we were investigating him?" "Brett always had contingency plans," Natalie said. "It was part of his business strategy. Always be prepared for the worst-case scenario." Her laugh was hollow. "I just never thought I'd be part of that worst case." We sat in silence for a moment. Through the window, I could see children walking home from school, their lives continuing normally while others were being torn apart. "What will you do now?" I asked finally. "Divorce him, obviously," Natalie said. "Try to salvage what I can from the financial wreckage. His company is in chaos. There will be lawsuits, investigations." She sighed heavily. "But mostly, I'll focus on helping Emma understand that none of this is her fault." Despite everything, I felt a new respect for Natalie. Beneath the perfect exterior was a resilience I hadn't expected. "And the other woman, Kimberly?" I asked cautiously. Natalie's expression tightened. "We've spoken, actually. She was as blindsided as I was. Thought Brett was divorced and co-parenting Emma with me." She shook her head in disbelief. "He told her I was difficult and vindictive, that I limited his time with Emma out of spite." "I'm sorry," I said again, inadequately. Natalie stood to leave. "Don't be. You didn't create this situation. Brett did." She paused at the door. "I want to hate you for exposing this, Allison. Part of me does. But another part." She sighed. "Another part knows I needed to see the truth, no matter how painful." After she left, I sat alone in my living room, processing the strange encounter. The carefully maintained social hierarchies of Oakridge had been upended overnight. Brett Anderson, once the town's golden boy, was now its greatest disgrace. Natalie, who had looked down on me for years, had sat in my home seeking understanding. When Tyler came home from school, I told him about Natalie's visit. "Is she going to cause problems for us?" he asked, concerned. "I don't think so," I said. "She's focused on protecting Emma and salvaging what she can of their finances." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "Do you regret what we did?" I considered the question carefully. "I regret the pain it's caused innocent people. But I don't regret exposing the truth." Brett was living a lie that hurt everyone around him, even if they didn't know it yet. "And the company?" Tyler asked. "Jessica texted me that they might have to lay people off if the financial situation is as bad as they think." That was the part that troubled me most, the potential collateral damage to employees who had done nothing wrong. "We'll help however we can if that happens," I promised. "Maybe connect people with openings at the hospital." In the weeks that followed, Brett remained missing. The FBI became involved when investigations revealed he had embezzled nearly $2 million over 7 years. His passport had been used to enter Mexico the day after our confrontation, but the trail went cold after that. Oakridge buzzed with the scandal. Some people, particularly those who had lost money or jobs due to Brett's fraud, praised the anonymous whistleblowers. Others, mainly those in Natalie's social circle, condemned them for exposing private matters and hurting innocent children. Tyler and I continued our normal routines as much as possible, neither confirming nor denying our involvement when asked directly. The truth would eventually come out, it always did in Oakridge, but for now, we were content to let the focus remain on Brett's actions rather than our exposure of them. The social dynamics of the town shifted subtly in the wake of the scandal. The perfect facades of other prominent families came under new scrutiny. People began to question what other secrets might be hiding behind closed doors and perfect social media presentations. For me, the most unexpected outcome was watching Natalie's transformation. Stripped of her social status and financial security, she revealed a strength and dignity I hadn't known she possessed. She took a job at a local real estate office, moved with Emma to a smaller home, and faced the gossip with her head held high. One afternoon, I ran into her at the grocery store. We exchanged awkward hellos, then she surprised me by asking, "Would you and Tyler like to come over for dinner sometime? Emma has been asking about him. She remembers how kind he was to her at the school carnival last year." The invitation caught me off guard. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Natalie smiled sadly. "Probably not. But I'm trying to teach Emma that life goes on after everything falls apart. And that sometimes the people you least expect become important in your life." I found myself nodding. "We'd like that." As I watched her walk away, I marveled at how dramatically our lives had changed in just a few short weeks. The woman who had once looked down on me for being a single mother was now facing that reality herself. The cruel comment that had set everything in motion. "At least my baby has a father," had become painfully ironic. Tyler and I had set out to expose a lie, to challenge the smug superiority of a woman who judged us without knowing our story. What we hadn't anticipated was how that exposure would transform not just Brett's victims, but our own understanding of truth, justice, and the complex consequences of bringing secrets to light. 3 months after Brett Anderson disappeared, life in Oak Ridge had found a new normal. The FBI had downgraded their search, concluding that Brett had likely established a new identity in a country without strong extradition ties to the United States. His company had been restructured under new leadership, with most jobs saved but at reduced salaries until the financial damage could be fully assessed. Brett faced multiple federal charges for wire fraud, tax evasion, and embezzlement. If he ever returned to the United States, he would face decades in prison. A warrant had been issued for his arrest, and his photo had been circulated to international law enforcement agencies, but most people believed he would never be found. Natalie had filed for divorce in Brett's absence and was granted a dissolution based on abandonment. She had managed to protect some assets for herself and Emma, though much of their former wealth had been seized or frozen pending investigation. The large colonial house had been sold, with proceeds divided between the government, the company, and Natalie's settlement. What none of us expected was the unlikely bond that formed between Natalie and Kimberly Davis. The two women, victims of the same elaborate deception, had initially avoided each other. But when Emma began asking questions about her half-siblings, Natalie had reached out to Kimberly to arrange a carefully supervised meeting between the children. That first awkward encounter had led to others, and eventually to a surprising friendship between the two women. They shared not just the experience of Brett's betrayal, but the challenge of rebuilding their lives as single mothers. Their children, innocent victims of their father's deception, found comfort in discovering they weren't alone. Tyler and I had kept our distance from this developing situation, feeling we had done enough by exposing the truth. But one Tuesday morning, I received a text from Natalie asking if we could meet for coffee. Curious, I agreed. The Oak Ridge coffee shop was busy with the morning rush when I arrived. Natalie sat at a corner table, looking remarkably different from the polished socialite I'd known for years. Her hair was cut in a practical bob, her clothes simple but elegant. She had the look of someone who had weathered a storm and emerged stronger, if somewhat battered. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. "I wanted to talk to you privately." "Is everything okay?" I asked. Natalie nodded. "As okay as it can be, under the circumstances." She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "I wanted to apologize to you properly." "Apologize?" "For the way I treated you all these years," she said simply. "For looking down on you because you were a single mother. For that horrible comment at the fundraiser." She met my eyes directly. "I was insecure and judgmental, and I'm truly sorry." Her sincerity caught me off guard. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." "The irony isn't lost on me," she continued with a wry smile. "I judged you for raising Tyler alone, all while my devoted husband was maintaining a whole separate family." "Life has a way of humbling us all eventually," I offered. "Some more dramatically than others," she agreed. "But you know what's strange? In some ways, I'm happier now. There's a freedom in having the worst happen and surviving it. I don't have to maintain a perfect image anymore. I understood that sentiment completely. How's Emma doing? Better than I expected, Natalie said. Kids are resilient. She misses her dad, of course, but she's adjusting to our new reality. And she loves her half-siblings, which is a blessing. And Kimberly? I asked cautiously. She's remarkable, actually. No bitterness toward me, even though I was technically the other woman from her perspective. She says we were both deceived, so why waste energy blaming each other? Natalie shook her head in wonder. I'm not sure I could be that gracious in her position. We talked for nearly an hour, the conversation flowing more naturally than I would have thought possible. Natalie had found a job she enjoyed, was making new friends outside her former social circle, and was even considering dating again eventually. As we prepared to leave, she touched my arm lightly. I know it was difficult for you and Tyler to expose Brett. You must have known there would be fallout for Emma and me. We struggled with that decision, I admitted. We gave Brett the chance to come clean himself first. I know. He mentioned that in the only communication I've received from him, a letter from somewhere in South America, apologizing and explaining that he couldn't face the consequences. She sighed. Classic Brett, running away rather than dealing with the mess he created. Do you wish we hadn't exposed him? I asked, the question that had troubled me for months. Natalie considered this thoughtfully. There are moments when I wish I could go back to my life of blissful ignorance, she admitted. But no, ultimately I'm grateful for the truth, painful as it was. I'd rather live authentically than in a beautiful lie. She hesitated, then added, You're an amazing mother, Allison. I see that now. You raised Tyler with integrity and strength, all on your own. That's something to be proud of. Her words, so different from the cruel comment that had sparked everything, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you, I said simply. The next school event, a fall festival fundraiser, felt surreal. Tyler and I entered the same gymnasium where Natalie had humiliated me months before, but everything had changed. The social hierarchies had shifted dramatically in the wake of Brett's scandal. Several other prominent families had quietly divorced or left town as their own secrets came under scrutiny. Natalie was there with Emma, working the bake sale table rather than organizing the entire event. When she saw us, she waved us over. Tyler, would you mind watching the table for a few minutes? She asked. Emma wants to show me her art project, but someone needs to handle sales. Sure, Mrs. Anderson, Tyler replied easily. It's Ms. Collins now, she corrected gently, having reverted to her maiden name. But you can call me Natalie. As they walked away, Emma chattering excitedly about her painting, Natalie glanced back at me with a small smile that acknowledged how far we'd all come. Tyler, now 17 and in his senior year, had grown from the experience in ways I hadn't anticipated. His exposure of Brett's deception had given him a quiet confidence, a certainty in his own moral compass that would serve him well in adulthood. You know what's weird, Mom? He said as we drove home that night. I thought I'd feel happier about how everything turned out. Like, vindicated or something. And you don't? I asked. He shook his head. Not exactly. I'm glad the truth came out. I'm glad Brett can't keep hurting people. But mostly I just feel. I don't know. Sad that it had to happen at all. That's called empathy, I told him. And it's one of the most important qualities a person can have. I still don't regret what we did, he clarified. But I wish it could have happened differently. That's the thing about truth, I said. It's necessary, but it's rarely painless. The scandal had faded from headlines, replaced by newer dramas and controversies. Brett Anderson became a cautionary tale, a name mentioned in hushed tones as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving. Those of us most affected by his deception continued to rebuild our lives, finding unexpected strength and connections in the aftermath. For me, the most profound change was internal. I no longer felt like an outsider in Oak Ridge, no longer measured myself against impossible standards of perfection. I had stood up for truth, protected my son's moral development, and handled a difficult situation with as much integrity as possible. That knowledge gave me a confidence that no social status or external validation ever could. As for Natalie, her cruel words at the fundraiser had come back to haunt her in the most devastating way possible. Yet through that devastation, she had discovered a resilience and authenticity she might never have known otherwise. Our unlikely connection, the single mother who had always been one and the woman who unexpectedly became one, was perhaps the most surprising outcome of all. Truth, as they say, is stranger than fiction. And sometimes, it's ultimately more healing as well. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have exposed Brett or kept his secret? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've ever had to make a difficult decision about revealing a painful truth, share your experience. Your story might help someone else facing a similar dilemma. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. Thank you for listening, and remember that integrity, while sometimes difficult, is always worth fighting for.